Well, hello everyone. I am Matt Williamson. How is everyone doing this fine day? Steelers are in a nice spot. I think everyone's week will go a little better after that win, considering the no Canada, the way Pickett played, really, really strong game from him and the offense as a whole. Where they stand in the playoff picture, teams like the Bills look like they're dead. The Bengals look like they're dead. Unbelievable. But as I usually do day after, I just have a lot of random nuggets. And this was something Dale Lawley wrote that I thought was really interesting. And I'm just going to lead off with that. So Cam Hayward had a sack against the Bengals yesterday, as you know. That's 13 and a half in his career against the Bengals. That's the most by any player in Bengals history. Okay. I mean, it doesn't blow you away, but you don't think of Cam Hayward as the sack master, but he's been playing a long time. He's a great player. Meanwhile, TJ Watt has 17 sacks against the Browns. He only needs 2 more to pass Terrell Suggs for most sacks against the Browns in their career in far, far fewer games. He's going to get there, folks. James Harrison holds the record for most sacks against the Ravens. He has 16. So a Steeler has the most sacks against every team in the division, in history. And Watt is only 2 behind Harrison for the Ravens lead. So probably in a year from now, Watt will have the most sacks ever against Ravens and against Browns, and Hayward will have the most against Bengals. It's pretty awesome, and I don't think a coincidence, by the way. So speaking of pass rush, Pittsburgh Steelers pass rush constantly harassed backup Jake Browning. 34.4% quarterback pressure rate, and you guys are aware of the 4 sacks. So they got after him with great consistency. I mean, if you're up at well over 30, that's a really good day in terms of pressuring the quarterback per dropback. Now, I will say he completed 60% of his passes while pressured and finished top 3 in yards per passing attempt rate. 8.7 yards on 32 total dropbacks. So he didn't fare too badly. And I didn't think he did watching him live either, but I thought that number was interesting. Sometimes give the opponent a little bit of credit. We all had low expectations for Browning. Maybe he wins another game or 2 for the Bengals this year. He was better than I thought. Maybe he can be Burrow's long-term backup. I mean, I'm not saying he's the next Kurt Warner or, Tom Brady. But I thought that was a decent showing from him, not with high expectations. But his biggest pass came on that screen play to Mixon. That was a 39-yarder. So that wasn't exactly high-level quarterbacking. And a deflected pass that Jamar Chase took for 31 yards. So those were his 2 biggest plays. They weren't exactly great quarterback throws. He only completed 1 pass of 10-plus air yards. Not great. Not great. So, again, I'm not saying the guy's phenomenal, but maybe he's a long-term backup in the division. Who knows? So, they didn't run a lot of plays. They didn't run the ball very much. They didn't run the ball successfully. But Cincinnati never ran the ball in this game on 3rd or 4th down. I wonder how many games throughout the season that actually happens. That's not a stat that I'm super aware of all the time. But every 3rd and 4th down, mainly 3rd, they're throwing the ball. It just shows that the Steelers defense early down success rate didn't have them in 3rd and 2, 3rd and 1, run pass situations where you could do either. So speaking of explosive stuff, Pittsburgh had 6 plays of 20 or more yards in this game. That's phenomenal. 4 through the air, 2 on the ground, but they had 6 plays of 20 or more yards on offense. And one thing you have to say, even when this offense has struggled, they have manufactured explosives. Maybe we're going to see even more of those. So very encouraging, of course. So some snap count stuff, some player usage stuff I found interesting. So one slight change in player usage is Calvin Austin cut into Allen Robinson's 11 personnel playing time slightly. Austin played 15 snaps in 11 personnel this week compared to Robinson's 37. Last week it was 8-42. And I know those aren't seismic changes, but I do think they're drifting towards less Allen Robinson, and a lot of that has to do with Freiermuth. And we're going to talk about 13 personnel with 3 tight ends on the field. We saw a nice portion of that. Maybe you get the Allen Robinson blocking stuff there, which he's done really well. But as I've said many times, he offers so little as a receiver at this point. So there's that, which isn't great. So speaking of snaps, the Steelers snapped the ball 71 times on offense, right? So Pickens had 53, Johnson had 52. Now remember, if you play a lot of 13, 1 back, 3 tight ends, you only have 1 receiver on the field. So those guys usually are 90, 100%. So they were lower because of the use of 13. Robinson still played 54 or 45. I'm sorry. Austin is up to 18 though. I mean, he's not doing a lot, but it is a little bump. And Boykin still shows up with 8. You know, he's a better blocker than Robinson. He doesn't offer much either. Frankly, he's not much different than Robinson at this point. But the tight end stuff, as I mentioned, we had Freiermuth play 42, Washington play 37, Hayward played 24, and Williams was even out there for 4. So, again, if you're going to have 13 personnel out there, it was almost always Muth, Washington, Hayward, but you mixed in Williams. He was active on this day. Rarely do they have 4 tight ends active. Williams does play teams, as does Hayward. So I like that situation. My article this week might be based around Freiermuth and the tight end usage in general. Still thinking about that. In terms of snaps for the running backs, Harris outsnapped Warren 38-34. I wrote this week that I think Warren is the better player. Not even the slightest knock on Najee. But Najee was the better player in this game. He was the hot hand. He was the physical pounder. He was tremendous in this game. So even routes run, Harris was slightly above Warren, 15-14. And then routes run amongst the tight ends I found interesting too. Freiermuth was at 25. It's a big number for a tight end in this situation. Washington at 13. Hayward at 8. So Washington going out 13 times is one of those subtle things where it just shows, I think they like this guy more and more, you know. So not uncommon for young players. I'll be back in a minute. I want to talk Freiermuth. I want to talk some Najee stuff, all sorts of stuff here. So just to reiterate how much of the game plan Freiermuth was. Last week, he was getting 7.7% of the targets. Very low number. This week, he was at 44% of the targets went to Freiermuth. Obviously by design. Obviously, that's a Canada coaching situation. And he averaged 4.8 yards every time he ran a route. Not every time they threw him the ball. Every time he left the line of scrimmage, he was at 4.8. And I've told you guys, if you're over 2 as a wide receiver, that's amazing. So phenomenal game by him. Phenomenal. And well done by the coaching staff, Pickett, everybody to make that all happen. So, but coming into that game, the Steelers' entire tight end room had 30 receptions, 48 targets, 228 yards for the whole season. Yesterday, they got 14 targets, the whole room, completed 12 of them, 141 yards, just to the tight ends. More than half of Pickett's passing totals, which was a big number this week, went to tight ends. You know, obviously that's a big deal. We'll see if that keeps up, or is that a Bengal related thing? Very well could be, because the Bengals are awful against tight ends. Bengal note. I told you before, they live in 11 personnel, 3 receivers on the field. But they changed things up. For this matchup with a different quarterback and against Steeler pass rush, they played 12 with double tight ends, 23% of their offensive snaps, after using it 10% total going into this game. Is that something the Steelers are going to see more of? Maybe. Who knows? And when the Bengals were in 12 personnel, 1 back, 2 tight ends, Tyler Boyd never was on the field for them. So he wasn't even considered really their number 2 receiver. Mentioned Najee was basically the hot hand here. He played great. And Dale also threw this nugget out that the Steelers ended up at 4.6 yards per carry. Great. You'll take that all day long. But if you pull out the 3 kneel downs from Pickett at the end, which they shouldn't even count on your rushing total, they would have been well over 5 yards per carry. So when you didn't concede yourself and kneel for 0 yards, they would have ended the day well over 5 yards per carry. You guys know I'm a big EPA nerd, and the Monday Nighter hasn't happened yet. But of all quarterbacks that played in Week 12, Pickett was 7th among total EPA. I mean, we're talking Josh Allen and Mahomes and Hurts and all those guys. He was 7th best. And how about this? Not even amongst tight ends, but of all pass catchers. Tyreek Hill, Freiermuth was number 1. Number 1 in total EPA. How much expected points added, what he added to his football team to make them score points. He was number 1 amongst all pass catchers this week. Talked about Chase versus Porter a little bit yesterday, and I didn't do the numbers, so I just caught this part that he ended up with 81 yards, but 31 of those were off those 2 tip passes, which I don't blame coverage for, but I do give him credit for it. I mean, they were very, very good football plays, and he's a phenomenal player. But I just wanted to throw that out there. I mean, 31 of his 81 yards were off those 2 tip balls. Now, my good buddy Mike Sando works for The Athletic, and he was talking about, the 58 game stretch when they didn't produce 400 yards. Okay, we all have heard about this stretch. Yeah, it's terrible. It's the Canada era, obviously. But you know what? This blew me away. So during those 58 games, when they did not produce 400 yards, they won 60% of their games. Now, I'm not saying it's a good strategy to produce 120 yards passing and 80 yards rushing and not get to 400, but tip the cap. During the Canada era, the offense was 25th in EPA during that whole stretch and 23rd during that 58 game stretch without a 400-yard game. But they were 5th on defense in that streak. So, again, you win 60% of your games without putting up 400 yards in 58 straight games is a testament to the organization. This game, again, produced 8 explosive plays. That would have been second most in the whole Canada era. So his whole tenure versus this game would have been second most in explosive plays in that whole time frame. So EPA is kind of hard to explain, but again, it's expected points added. So like one bad play can really hurt you. And just to kind of explain it a little bit better, a massive 6.5 point swing, like we're talking about Jaylen Warren's lost fumble, basically cost the Steelers 6.5 points on the scoreboard. So I'll just read this off. A massive 6.5 point EPA swing associated with running back Jaylen Warren's lost fumble deep in Bengals territory, that it matters a lot, on Pittsburgh's opening drive made this a break-even offensive EPA game. That play was so bad that all the good that happened meant today was an average EPA game. So just to put some context here, but they were plus 8.7 on defense. They were also minus 2.7 on special teams. That all adds up to a plus 6.0 net, which mirrors the game's score differential. So yeah, they were the much better team, but a play here and there and a little bit of special team stuff made this thing closer than it was. And it was just a different way of looking at it from an analytical perspective. So now, really good game offensively, especially that Warren stuff aside. As you know, they were phenomenal on third downs. That's great. Now, let's focus towards taking this thing a step further and get great in the red zone. Get great when the field is tight. They were better, way better, throwing the ball in the middle of the field. They were really good on third downs. Pivotal, hard things to do. But now, let's get that red zone offense cranking. So there you have it. That's what I got for today. Just a whole bunch of stuff. All right, take care. Over and out.